I know you have all kinds of questions about RPMs, ads, optimizing your site for ads, words you shouldn't put on your site to be more optimized for RPMs and ads, and all the things in between. Well, good news for you. I interviewed James Baldwin from Raptive, and he gives us all the info we need to know about how to make sure our sites are so optimized for RPMs. You guys are going to be raking in the RPM money after listening to this and doing some finessing on your sites. James also talks a little bit about the Google Search Rater Guidelines and how we should be approaching that. He talks about third-party cookies. Are they actually going away? And he talks about those AI sites that are stealing food sites' content and what Raptive is doing about that. This episode is totally packed with so much value. I know you're going to love it. It is episode number 692. So let's get into this because I know we have a lot to talk about. Now, you work for Raptive, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And Raptive is, well, why don't you just, if anyone is not in the know, just describe what Raptive does.
Yeah. So Raptive is the largest ad management company in the internet. And in fact, is the largest source of ad impressions on the internet. So when like an ad buyer looks at the ecosystem and says like, I would like to buy ad impressions. If they look at just, the total number of dollars spent of ad impressions, on the internet, that flows through Raptive. And really like we don't own, well, technically we have one tiny small test site, but other than our small test site, we don't own any sites. We manage the advertisements for, folks kind of spanning from, maybe folks who consider themselves bloggers to, creators, professional publishers, and all the way up to some, very large sites that, aren't in any way, shape or form, a blog, and whatnot. So we run their ads, make them money, and they can just focus on the things that they're amazing at. So
Yeah, you guys do such a great job. My blog has been with Raptive I was trying to figure it out. I think it's been at least 8 years or something like that back when you were at Thrive. And I love you guys. You're the best. Not only do you do a great job with, what you're good at, the ads, but your team is so nice. You're also nice and lovely. So just have nothing but good things to say about you guys.
That is good to hear. Honestly, this is going to be silly, but like we have a channel in Slack where we like celebrate just those things where it's like, oh my goodness, Megan emailed in and like, and giving each other kudos and like, it's certainly a part of the culture of just to like, how can we have like genuinely good humans? Cause like the people we serve are great humans. And so how can we, and that's kind of just part of our core values to be human and make things better and whatnot. But it starts with great humans. So
yeah, well, that carries through. You can definitely tell that you guys prioritize that. So let's talk about some of the things that I hear these things all the time, just floating around in our space. One of them is discrepancies between RPMs. Why would one site or one blogger get, for an example, like $20 RPMs as an average versus another site that gets like 60 or 70, or I've even heard of more recently? Why that discrepancy?
Definitely. We get that question all the time. We have a large support team, to be honest, that like answers that question of, all the time. And there's many things that we can know and, can easily, kind of quantify and whatnot. And there's some things that are advertiser preference and whatnot. So let's start with the things that we can just know. The biggest driver of this discrepancy is US versus non-US traffic. And really not just those two buckets, but even like US traffic is really, really high RPMs. Compared to that, Canada is a little bit less, and Australia, New Zealand are, right in there. Then you have the UK, which GDPR knocked that down. Then you have kind of like after the UK, there's some other like the UAE, there's some other like smaller countries. And then you have like Germany and the Netherlands and kind of, if you will, Northwestern Europe minus France. And then like France is kind of like clustered with like Southern Europe. And as you get like to Spain and Italy, like RPMs are not great. And then, Africa, chunks of Africa, there's, hot spots and whatnot, but, Africa, like India, Indonesia, whatnot, kind of low RPMs, Singapore, decent RPMs, but not tons of traffic, and whatnot. So there's lots of different things. Like ads right now don't even run in Russia. So if you go viral in Russia, we won't serve any ads because they're sanctioned. They're sanctioned. Yeah. So it's an odd kind of thing of like, Google has like no ads, and per the United States, no ads are allowed. So yes, so that's like the biggest driver. Like that's like first and foremost, if you're checking with your friends, US traffic. Then there's ad layout and whatnot, and it's not even so much like the settings. Settings matter for sure, but especially in food sites, it's where are you putting your ads. I'm going to kind of use some general rules of thumbs. It can vary, but like generally 65 to 75% of readers and their time is spent on your recipe card. Okay. So some folks may run one ad in the recipe cards, or no ads in the recipe card, or an ad kind of pushed down and out of the way. Okay. You can do whatever you want, but if you're comparing, say, to somebody who has, an ad alongside their, I'm going to talk desktop, but ad alongside their ingredients, some ads in the instructions and, whatever, if it's, the same recipe, nice long recipe, and there's 2, 3, 4 ads in the recipe on the one site versus one, and they're kind of 2, 3, 4 ads, and they're like where the readers are spending their time, that's going to earn quite well. You have one ad kind of pushed down or pushed above the ingredients or whatever, kind of put like, I just want this out of the way. That's going to earn a lot less. Additionally, in content kind of works similarly. There's places where the readers are spending time in your content. Generally speaking, on recipe sites, they're where you're kind of like detailed out, like, oh, here's some of the ingredients and here's the step-by-step. That's, I think, like a lot of folks have evolved their post to have like a detailed step-by-step with images and whatnot. Well, that's where the readers are going to spend their time in the meat of the post. Oftentimes we'll see creators block that out. They'll use a good bird block and like, I don't want any ads in here. It's totally fine, but like that's where the readers are spending time. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where that's where advertisers want to spend their money. It's like a billboard, right? If you were a billboard company, would you want your billboard on the street where the cars drive by, or on the side street where the cars don't drive? Like, you're going to pay more money for the one that is where the cars are driving. So those are some of the nuances that we see in terms of ad layout. So, having ads where folks are spending their time. It's less and less about more ads, but it is about, hey, how do we have an ad, kind of always on screen, if you will. Like, in addition, the footer ads, and this works Raptive, other ad providers too. The footer ads, the sticky sidebar ads, all of those, they refresh every 30 seconds. Okay. If they're on screen, they're going to refresh. And every time that the ad refreshes, it's a fraction of a penny. I wish we could just say it's a penny. It's not quite a penny. It's a quarter of a penny or something, but like it's a little bit of money. But if you think about that, if somebody is, so the more like, oh, if you always have a recipe ad on screen, even as they're scrolling, they scroll to the next section of your recipe card and, oh, there's another one. Then that gives you the opportunity for that to keep refreshing and that page view to kind of keep earning the maximum. If you say, I don't want ads where the readers are spending their time, then you just lose those fractions of pennies. But like the folks listening to this podcast, right, we're talking tens of thousands of visits a month. Then like those fractions of a pennies times 10,000 visits really adds up. So that's the, placement of the ads is important. The third piece, and really I maybe should have said second, is just reader behavior, and specifically how long are readers on your site. We can think of the recipe journey as for readers in maybe three. We'll try this out. Tell me what you think here, Megan. And specifically, we've kind of thought through this on email. It can vary depending on traffic source, but if you have people coming from email, if you send out an email, and I know this because I watch my wife read emails from food bloggers, food creators. Like, she gets an email, she's laying in bed. It's the 15 minutes in between when her alarm has gone off and the kids have not yet woken up, right? That's how much time she has. Like, oh, like that recipe looks good. maybe we'll make that this, and it's like it's a 20, 30-second page view. It's like, oh, do I actually want to make this? Right. And so I kind of call that like discovery. And that can happen that could happen from Google, that could happen from Pinterest. It used to happen a ton on Pinterest, right? When pins used to go viral and you'd get like, oh my goodness, I had it might have been 100,000 page views. Like I had 100,000 page views. Like it's just this huge spike. And all of those pins were people like quickly checking the recipe and like, okay, this looks, I'll pin this and come back to it. And now the trick is that that spike, those discovery page views are low RPM because they're only 15, 20, 30, 40 seconds, right? You maybe get one ad refresh, but you don't get a ton. You get a little bit. It's valuable. It's great, but you don't get a ton. Now, the second type, and oftentimes this is from Google and what I would see from Pinterest right now, is more of like a meal planning. Like, okay, I know I want to make meatloaf. So like, hey, I have this meatloaf. Like, I'm going to come back to it. It could be from email. Like, okay, I saw that email, a week ago. Now I'm actually going to make that meatloaf. I'm going to re-click, and now I'm going to spend a couple minutes. Like, okay, what do I have in the pantry? Like, oh, what do I need? Okay, I need some hamburger. I need some breadcrumbs. I need, like, okay, oh, low on ketchup. Got to get to Costco. Whatever. Like that's like planning, and it's a couple minutes, and that's a medium RPM page view. Like that's good, but it's not super high. The third is then cooking. Okay, and when your readers are actually cooking off of your site, it's a very high RPM. Okay, because that page view now could be 10 minutes. I think of a chicken cacciatore that my wife had me make off of one of the sites that we work with, Raptive. Like I was on that site, felt like all afternoon. It was, I think it was 45 minutes that I'm like, chopping mushrooms and like, how do I do the chicken and sear it? And then I boil it or I simmer it. Anyway, it was all day. Now, so that page view, like I probably showed up as like a $350 RPM page view for her because I was on it so long. Now the trick is that like that mix on your site of your traffic that is in like discovery mode, like, oh, what's this? To like, okay, like, do I want to make this? Like, hey, I'm considering it, to like actually cooking is and like how long does cooking take? Like say for instance, cocktails, that's generally low RPM content. Cocktails are great. It's amazing. People love them. There's a good amount of traffic out there, but like how long does that cooking page view take? Like it's about 50 seconds, right? Because you're like, okay, an ounce and a half, little this, and you're done. Like, okay, I just needed to make sure that I had the amounts right, which is great. That chicken cacciatore took like, hours, which is great too. But what we sometimes find is it's like, oh, should I just do, these big aspirational recipes that take all day? And it's like, well, maybe, but the trick is there. What we generally tend to see is that the percentage of those page views that maybe are like actually people cooking is kind of low because it's almost like an aspirational recipe versus like meatloaf. It's like meatloaf or banana bread or, some of these, that like, there's a lot of people cooking this. You can see by the data, you can see that it's wildly high RPM and whatnot. So, but we kind of see that. And so that's one of the big differences, is like how long are readers actually spending on the page? Because again, your ads are refreshing every 30 seconds. Same at Raptive, other ad providers, all the same. And that's why, like, even if say, somebody who's high RPM switches ad providers, they're going to have a high RPM. Like somebody who's low RPM is going to switch ad providers. They're probably still going to have a low RPM because you're like, in a month, you're not going to change the reader behavior a ton on your site.
Sure.
Like it might evolve over time and whatnot. And that's why too, if you look at the RPM by page, in your, say if you're with Raptive with performance by page, you can see like, oh, here's these pages, here's how many, you can see like an impressions per page view. And it like, there's some pages where I can see 30, 35 ad impressions per page view. And it's not because we have 35 ad slots. It's because there's, there's maybe 10 ad slots, but that footer ad on average shows 10 impressions because on average, somebody's on the page 5.5 minutes. So, and that's a huge difference. We're working, I will say, if you have a site with Raptive and you're kind of interested, we have more data behind the scenes than we have in our creator dash. We're working on getting more of that in your hands. But we can even like share like, here are the pages that have more footer ad refreshes. We can give you kind of the overall, for your site, like, oh, on average, you have 3.5 footer ad refreshes per kind of initial impression. That gives you a sense of like on average. But I see food sites that are at like 2 or 3, and I see food sites that are at 7 and footer ad refreshes. And that's just this huge discrepancy, because it's not just the footer ad, it's the recipe ads, it's the videos that the video ads that you're running. All of those are basically just the longer they run, the more money they produce. So, and that is the biggest difference between a lot of sites.
So interesting. I've never heard that described before. So if people are coming to your site and just not making the recipe, that's probably going to affect your ads or your RPMs hugely, it sounds like.
Yeah. And you can kind of think about it. The thing that makes food kind of an outlier in terms of RPM, right? Because a lot, like, I work with folks travel, finance is its own outlier because it's like credit card companies and banks, but like, travel, crafting, fantasy football, like all these different things, like food is this like outlier. And we'll all have like, some dude who runs a gaming site. He's like, should I start a food site? And I'm like, well, if you're a great cook, maybe, but, cause he'll see these RPMs. He's like, what are these ladies doing? Like, why, how do they have all these, $60, $70 RPM? And I'm here with 12. And I'm like, it's an outlier because of the cooking, like the actual time spent cooking. One of the other interesting things is, and I chat with folks, some folks have articles about food. Okay. And articles about food don't earn like a recipe does. It earns like an article does, which is a quarter maybe of a recipe. And so that's just, yeah. So if people are like, oh, this is interesting, this is a curiosity, but never actually cook it, then, that page is going to earn much more like a article does than say a recipe.
Okay. So optimizing for ads, is that something we can do on our own? Is that something we should rely on an ad network for? How do we go about doing that?
Yeah. So one of the kind of unique things at Raptive is we have a pretty sizable team dedicated to supporting our creators and actually proactively reaching out with suggestions. And it will kind of vary season by season. Like if we have sometimes it's like, oh, we don't have huge recommendations. So then we're chipping away at small recommendations and, but we're proactively going through all of the sites we work with and sending out emails. So you will see that. And I just would encourage you, now they are going proactively just through the list of like, who haven't we chatted with in a while? So I know some folks are like, I want to be chatted with every 2 months. Okay, great. Like email in, fantastic. And the people who email in are at the top of the list. So, you can certainly email in and whatnot. In terms of, we just would encourage folks. I know, like I hear lots of different things. One of the things that we're actually doing right now is we're turning down ad density, especially on kind of all sites, but especially like food. Google had their search rater guidelines that were published in January. And there was I wish they would have picked like a really great recipe to like slice, like analyze. They picked like a post that was all about this creator's like trip. She had, so it was kind of like a traditional blog post, like, oh, here's my family's trip and here's pictures and, all this stuff. And at the end, here's a recipe of, something that we had on this trip. And they're like, oh, well, it's, the content's a little off topic for the recipe. And it's like, well, yeah, I like, like that wasn't super helpful or on task, Google, but thank you. So we were trying to like read the tea leaves of like, what do you mean? And they mentioned things like, oh, there's a lot of like secondary content, right? And really what they meant is like things that are not super important to the core. Like the primary content is probably the recipe card, at least in their mind. It's like, oh, I want the recipe for this thing. But there's probably other things that like, are very important. And one of the things that like we see a lot is like chatted with a creator who she was working on a creme brulee. And she said, I have done 23 versions of creme brulee. And she's like, I finally landed on one. And for her, it wasn't just like, I want the best creme brulee. She's like, I need one that, that's kind of like user friendly, like easy to make, and foolproof that whatever, because that's kind of her brand, her niche. And so she's like 20, and I'm like, well, hold on a second, like that is extremely important to kind of articulate, and maybe even talk about like, oh, if you want this, like if you need a little bit more of this, like you could do something like this. There's like a lot of process and a lot of discovery and a lot of science that you've kind of done, that is beyond just like, this is my kid's favorite dessert, that like is very meaty and very like, primary content and whatnot. So it's not that like the blog post part of is totally get rid of it all. It's more like, no, like really think through the things that are the primary importance. And sometimes there's things where you're like, yeah, you're maybe stretching for some words there. You're doing the old college paper, like got to get to 12 pages. Like, I think in this day and age, the good news is that Google's saying that they don't really want that. But being careful then even about like, how many email subscribe widgets do you have? Like some, one or two, definitely. I was just chatting with somebody and we were going through a popular page and she had 4 like in her content. She's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know I had 4. Like, yeah, number 4 probably isn't doing much for you. Right. So there's those things and whatnot. And then along with that is ads, right? The nice thing is that if you're shortening up your content just in general, you're going to probably reduce the number of ads, but we're also dialing ad density down a little bit. And for us, it's actually driven a little bit by the SEO side, and what Google is saying is SEO may take into account in the future. Like it doesn't, we've done lots of testing and ads don't impact SEO that we can detect yet, maybe in the future, but they kind of be hinting that like too much scrolling could hurt SEO or could hurt search positions. But what we're seeing is too from premium advertisers, especially with the economy being very interesting right now. My retirement account looks very interesting from day to day. But with that, what we're seeing is premium advertisers are demanding more, or maybe demanding less. They want, hey, it's the old ad density where, like, hey, let's stuff in as many ads as possible. That's kind of out the window. The premium advertisers are willing to pay more for sites that, have kind of a premium ad experience. That means ads where readers actually are. But that means also like not just stuffing all the areas where readers aren't full of ads. So we're spending a lot of time reducing ad layouts, kind of trading like, oh, we could get rid of these 2 and put 1 here, and you'd probably be ahead of the game. So I would highly encourage you to engage with your ad provider. Just get things dialed in, and just know like folks spend their time in the recipe card. It's probably where you want to show ads. The rest, like, you could probably get by with way less ads outside the recipe card.
You mentioned the Google Search Rater guidelines. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure thing. I know enough to be dangerous. But so the Google Search Rater guidelines, so there are human beings that actually, and I think maybe fewer than there used to be, but there are some humans. Actually, I don't know 100%. But there are humans that Google has actually go to sites, and they give them this. It's over 100 pages long of these guidelines. And somebody who knows SEO should probably talk to all the specifics, but in there, they actually talked about food sites, and, some different things and what they're focused on is there's like different ratings. They can give like a lowest, low, I think like a medium and a high and a highest, are like for it, there's all sorts of criteria, which would be a whole podcast episode.
Sure.
But anyway, all these, and so some of the things with the food in particular, that they were like, how easy is it to get to the recipe card? So like a jump to recipe button, they're like, if you have a jump to recipe button that's easy to find, that's like, that weights more towards at least kind of average to highest, versus like, I couldn't find it, or it wasn't there, and I'm scrolling a mile and a half, and whatnot. So that's kind of the biggest thing to take away. And so we talked about, like related posts, we talked about email, we talked about ads, we talked about fluffy text. Like, highly encourage folks to clean stuff up. The other thing is images. Sometimes food sites can show 5 finished product images, and it's just, I've chatted with folks and it's like, oh, I break up my sections or whatever, and it's like, okay, like that was maybe how we used to do things, but like now Google's indicating pretty strongly that that's maybe not how they want it. And to readers, like they don't want to scroll and scroll and scroll. So we're encouraging folks as much as possible switch to horizontal images. Like that's a great way to reduce scrolling.
Oh.
It's horizontal. And then number two is like just use images that serve readers. But like if you've done a glamour shot or two, of your cake or your pasta or your steak or whatever you're doing, fantastic. But number three, number four, number five, probably like the readers are already either sold or not sold. Like they're going to cook it or not, and it's probably not going to be image number four that's going to convince them. So you just probably don't need that. Use images where it's appropriate. In some of the step-by-step, but even then, like sometimes I'll see like, here's pasta set in a stock pot. And I'm like, and sometimes I'll see the big vertical image and I'm like, I don't think that one was necessary. And so like, just like you taking all of your steps to, just like condense. And the good news is I think that these are things that readers want. So it's not like, really it's not so much even optimized for Google. It's like optimized for readers. Maybe some of the things that we felt like, oh, Google wants us to do this thing, so I've got to do this. I got to, another 500 words because Google wants it. The good news is I think that they're getting into a world where that's not so much the case. And we can kind of just continue to focus more and more on optimizing for readers.
So by adhering to some of those things in the search rater guidelines, we are impacting our RPMs positively, hopefully.
Yes. So far, the nice thing is, and I can speak for sure for Raptive, I can't. So we're doing a lot of testing with folks who are testing all sorts, myriads of things, of horizontal images. Some folks are moving the recipe cards. Some folks there's all sorts of things. Just removing fluff and like, oh, okay, good goodness. Or taking things that you're like, these are like somewhat important and, moving them below the recipe card. There's different things. And what I would encourage is, so I'm on the revenue side. I would encourage you just to try. If you're like, I've always wanted to test, give it a shot. And my one kind of asterisk is like, whatever you try, just like take a look, make sure that your Raptive video player, that sticky video player that earns a big chunk of your revenue, after you've made your changes, make sure that thing still plays, but before somebody gets onto the ingredients, that thing is playing and earning money and whatnot.
Okay.
And then keep track of your before and after. Like, I made this change April 15th. We'll celebrate tax day by making changes to our sites. And like, okay, I made this change. Don't make it on like your top post, please. But like if you have something, you're like, oh, this one gets 1,000 page views, a month. And, if and it's not your bank, your mortgage is not riding on it. Okay, I'm going to make some changes. I'm just going to see. And then, we can check RPM before, after, and whatnot. But a lot of these tests we're seeing minimal impact. We are certainly losing some ad impressions, like on the content side, but what we're seeing is that readers are maybe spending a little bit more time on the page, kind of making up for it. So we're not seeing like RPMs are way up, but we're also not seeing that RPMs are way down. Just be careful. Just like, and if you're with Raptive, you can just email in and say, hey, I'm just checking in. I, made this change here. Could you take a look? And whatnot. And the team is very happy to, or you say like, I made this change this day. Could you check before and after? They're very happy, very happy to help.
Okay, cool. Sometimes I go into my RPM section of my dashboard and I'll see an RPM that's like $250. And that just like, why does this happen? And if like, is there anything, if anything, I should do with that post?
Yeah. My guess is that post that has $250 RPM is probably very low in page views or very low.
Yes, it's usually, yep.
And so what you're looking at there is largely just caused by a very small sample size. But yeah, when you get down to a sample size of and sometimes I'll run a report and it's like, yeah, I'm looking at like one reader, like I don't know who they are, but it's like, oh, this one page view. And sometimes it's like 10 cents and sometimes it's $500. And so there is this enormous difference, same page and whatnot. So what you do see, and that's why I would generally recommend that you don't look at pages RPM that have less than 150 or 200 page views, just because at about
Okay.
200, you kind of like get it. But yeah, just know that, yeah, there are page views that probably are earning $1,000 RPM,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, earning zero, I suppose, if, somebody blocks ads. So, and there's kind of everything in between, but yeah, but generally what we're talking about at RPM is like, the averages over, you know, thousands, tens of thousands of data points, and all of those outliers kind of all get washed out.
Okay. Come together. Okay, that makes
Mhm.
more sense. Yeah, it's always a little bit alarming. I did see a $1,200 RPM post a while ago. I was like, what? That would be amazing if that just
Mhm.
started flooding the traffic in and the money. But
Mhm.
like you said, it's usually for really, really low page views, URLs as
Yep.
well.
Yeah.
I have a question about those. I don't remember what you guys call them, but they're red flag words or words that we should maybe avoid putting in our
Brand safety.
content because,
Yep.
okay, yeah, advertisers flag them or don't like them.
Mhm.
Uh, can you talk about that and how do we know what those words are?
Definitely. So the concept is that there are companies out there that they'll crawl your content, and they have, and I should start on the advertiser side. When an advertiser is setting up a campaign, right, it happens, and this is like a default screen in the platforms, they call the DSPs, where they're literally punching in, how much do I want to spend, which audience do I want to target, and whatnot. One of the things that they can say is like, okay, what sort of content do you want to avoid? And the options, it's like, this is probably not perfectly accurate, but I always like to, when I train my team, I'm like, okay, imagine that you're 23, you're just out of college, and here you are, you're the button pusher, you're trafficking deals. So you get to this screen. Okay. Well, all is that, you've heard the CEO. It's like, I don't want in my ads showing anything bad. Right. Well, so you have a bunch of check boxes of things that could be bad. So, check, 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 right? Almost. And it's just kind of the way, like, so, but it could be anything. It's like alcohol. Do you want, you're like, nope, don't want it on alcohol. Now, the
Yeah,
reality is that the alcohol could be like, this person got arrested for, public intoxication, which, like, yeah, you don't want your ads on that, maybe. Or this could be like, oh, here is this rum cake, like,
right.
but that checkbox is just alcohol.
Yeah,
And similar, you have violence, politics, you have, like, all of the different things, religion, you just kind of on down the thing. So the the part where there becomes difficulties for creators is like, yeah, like rum cake, like, oh, it's a great cake, it's, whatever, you're not getting drunk, like, it's fine.
yeah,
But because you use the word rum 3 times in it, the automated bots that are crawling your site are like, ooh, this look, oh, it has rum in the title, must be bad,
yeah.
and it'll say like, okay, that's it'll ding it, and maybe sometimes there's a little bit more nuance. Sometimes there's like medium alcohol and high alcohol now,
Hmm.
and they're like, oh, maybe it's a medium now. It's mentioned a couple times, but so that's the biggest thing. We have a tool in the Raptive dashboard that helps some. We pay for the data from one of the providers, one of the data providers that works with advertisers, to help them identify which pages they want to avoid. So if you go into your Raptive dashboard, on the left-hand side, you'll see brand safety. And you might have to open up the performance tab or whatnot, but you'll see brand safety there, and you can actually see, are there pages that have been dinged. Now, that is not the full list of every page, but hopefully gives you an idea. One of the silly examples is, we had somebody she had a margarita post, and she's writing it, or she'd written it, and somewhere in there, on this page, it was then noted that it was flagged for hate speech. Well, there's nothing bad. One of the biggest places to be careful is comments. You don't want to let people post, you know, F words or any swear words. You don't want to let people post, that was intoxicating, or that's so
Hmm.
addicting, or, you know, like, just like any of
Yeah,
those sort of things. Because, like, if you get a bunch of people saying like, oh man, that's so addicting. And, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, that must be about drugs.
Yeah.
So it's part of it is that's why the reason we have the dashboard is to help people. But it's just to like, as you're approving comments, just be very aware of like, is there a secondary meaning to these words? Anyway, back to the hate speech margarita. It turned out, and our team, if you see a flag and you're like, I don't get it, I have no idea. Like, don't worry, you're in good company. So we have a team that they'll dig. They have some tools that try to help, and we're trying to actually maybe get something with AI. It's like AI is actually, it's like some like parsing language. AI is pretty good at. So you could say like, hey, AI is something on this page could be construed to be with hate speech or something. Anyway, and this was in the pre-AI days when we had to do it all human powered. One of my managers, she was digging through, and finally she found the word limey. It was a limey margarita, and it turns out that limey can be a derogatory term for like British folks. And
What?
sure enough, she
I have
deleted.
no idea.
She made it like a long, like turn limey to lime flavored. It was no longer hate
Wow.
speech, and the CPM like jumped by 40%. Yeah.
Oh
So
my gosh.
it's like a silly example, and it was like a small page for her. I don't think it was, it was a couple bucks, but
Sure.
it's just be very cognizant of, I have like, say religious food bloggers, right? I think I can't remember if we're in Ramadan or just finished Ramadan, or maybe it's just a start, but if you have a menu item that's like, hey, Ramadan recipes, and you have, Ramadan everywhere, or Easter or Passover, like these different things that are great. You just want to be careful of like, hey, if this is a lamb recipe for Passover, fantastic. That could make sense to have Passover in that recipe. But like if you have that as a menu, item that's on every page, you could, your site could get dinged
Hmm.
for, for like that, like, oh, I don't want to be on anything about religion. And, the
Right.
bots are not smart. And it's like, I see religion on every page. So I'm
Yeah.
going to just avoid this site. So those are the
Wow.
things to be very, very cognizant of. And then too, like I know one really, really smart food creator that I was working with. I don't know all the story, but it must have been a bad day. She'd written an oatmeal post. At the end of it, she just included some 4-letter words because that was how the day was going. And it became a very popular page. And it was like, but it was always low RPM. And we're like, oh, I don't know. And finally I read it. It's going to sound silly, but like I'm looking at all the ads, I'm looking at all the stats. I'm a numbers guy. I don't always read. I read it and I got to the end. I was like, oh, this, like, I don't know what happened, but like probably, on this very popular oatmeal page, it's probably time for this to go. She's like, oh man, yes, of course, so it's just
Hmm.
good to kind of keep that in mind of like, we want to be personable, like that's more and more important, brand and authenticity and whatnot. But like too, sometimes people's brands, like it's like, does your brand need to include that 4-letter word because it's costing you 10% of your revenue?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know,
Yeah, it is something that a lot of food bloggers aren't aware of. We started talking about it in some of our groups, and people were blown away. They were like, what? I use the word. One of the words I can think of is addicting, because
mm-hmm,
people use that all the time to describe
mm-hmm,
brownies or food that you
mm-hmm,
can't stop eating.
yep,
So going back through and just seeing your content with a different lens and seeing how that could be construed as drug
yes,
related, or I think one of the words for me, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was irresistible. It was something that kind of had an insinuation other than
mm-hmm,
food. And so I deleted a bunch of those instances and my RPMs went up for those posts. So,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, it is
mm-hmm,
worthwhile going through and just doing a little bit of an audit. What kinds of words are you using? And the comments
yes,
too. I did not think of the comments.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And just as an aside, I've been working with a food creator. She had maybe accidentally allowed links in her comments. And so she was getting all these really positive comments. And then people were like, they'd add a link and like, they'd like hide it. They'd do it smart. It's like, oh my goodness, this is the best recipe. And like the word recipe would be linked. And it was like links to all sorts of garbage on the internet. It was like SEO,
Oh, oh
kind of
no.
like there were naughty sites that her site was linking to, and she was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea.
Oh
And then it was a bunch of
gosh.
work. So it's just like you should never ever ever allow people to
Yeah.
link on your site. Don't let them link their gravatar or, anything in the comments. Because like you just never know. All of a sudden you're going to get a lot of comments and they're all going to be like,
Oof.
well, there was like
Yeah.
there was like buy boxes and, to much worse stuff.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
So,
good to have on our radar. Thank you for that.
One other thing that the word download gets flagged for like illegal downloads, like,
Oh.
so if you're like, hey, download my ebook, like, don't say download my ebook, say like, get my ebook, like claim my ebook, whatever. We'll see on occasion, like somebody will get flagged for like illegal downloads. And we're like,
Oh.
nothing here. And it was like, oh, it's just you had 2 or 3 email things that said download. And it's real frustrating that these systems are not sophisticated, and they're not sophisticated because like there's so many ad impressions out there. There's so much traffic. There's so much content that like advertisers don't need to advertise on all of it. So they can kind of like, these tools are just like, oh, it said download twice, probably bad. Or it said limey, probably bad.
Right. Download is not one I would ever have thought of. That's not been on my radar. All right.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, James, about something that's been kind of ominously looming over our heads for a couple of years now.
Yes.
You probably know what I'm going to ask. The third-party cookie situation, is that actually going to happen? Are they going to go away?
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting situation. Google, said like, we're going to give readers the choice. That was last year in 2024, which some people were like, great, they're not going away. And it was like, well, if you see how, say like Apple, like I have an iPhone, if you install an app, like, and it's not like a banking app, if it's like a fantasy football app, you're going to see like the screen is going to be like, please, sir, please click allow. On the next screen, there's going to be a pop-up that says like allow tracking. And then like you go to the next screen and it's like, the screen is like, this app wants to follow you everywhere on the internet. And you're like, you probably want to click this, like you want to say no. And that is how Apple gives you the choice to like, let apps do the equivalent of third-party cookies. And so we kind of expect like, yeah, Apple is going to do something like that presumably they're going to do something that 95% of folks are going to say, whoa, that sounds scary, and say no. And that is if Chrome does not get sold. Like Chrome, the DOJ has said, I think, it's looking more and more likely like they're at least going to try to make Google sell Chrome, which interestingly would then probably get rid of the need for the user choice. Because if Chrome was its own independent company or, not owned by Google, many of the concerns that existed with Google getting rid of third-party cookies won't exist, and they maybe could just flip the switch and get rid of third-party cookies. So at Raptive, we're still spending a ton of time just preparing the technologies so that, hey, folks who want personalized ads, how can we give them great personalized ads? Like kind of joke, but like the reason that there's foot fungus ads a lot of places is because a lot of people have foot fungus, and you can kind of cast a wide net. You can just kind of throw them out there everywhere, and like you never know who's going to click. But like if you don't want the internet to be foot fungus, and you won't believe what President Obama got me for my house and on my mortgage rate, and all those silly ads that we've seen over the years. That like personalized ads is like the opposite of that. Those are non-personalized ads. They're just, hey, like they're bidding a little bit of money to show it to, as many people as possible. So we're working on, a ton of amazing technologies to help, the creator sites recognize readers, share those personalized ads, and seeing, to be honest, huge RPM boosts. I think there was just this past month, a couple things that rolled out, another big chunk of RPM boost. There's a couple things now that are going to be another percentage points of RPM increase for Raptive creators as those things roll out. And that's like with third-party cookies still around, because like Safari doesn't have third-party cookies. So we're seeing great revenue wins there. And it gives us a lot of confidence when the existing Safari, which doesn't have third-party cookies, which is pretty limited in its ability to get IP addresses and different things. When we can see those technologies work on Safari, then we know, okay, these are probably going to work when Chrome goes away. And look, now creators are making maybe 3% more on Safari or 4% more on Safari, whatnot, kind of as we just continue to build. So now on the advertiser side, they're kind of entrenched, like they're using third-party cookies, and Google, every time Google delays, they like stop preparing. And then it's like they get a month before, like, oh, it's going to happen now. We got to prepare. So chances are, whenever it happens, there's going to be a week or two where RPMs are going to be really bizarre. You're going to see individual page views where like somebody has not updated their Chrome, and they're the last person in the world with third-party cookies, and like they're getting, $10,000 RPMs because these advertisers who forgot to like flip the switch and are like, they're all bidding as high as they possibly can, so you're going to have some of that. And then, and oh my goodness, why, I was supposed to spend $1,000 yesterday and I spent 200. Why? And what do you mean third-party cookies are? So there's going to be some bumps for sure. But the nice thing is more and more we're projecting yep, the future is bright, especially for creators who have just deeply engaged audiences that you're engaged with. I encourage like commenting. Commenting is great. Like get in there with the comments and like engage, because like that's a great way that people, share their email address with you and whatnot. That helps your ads pay more. But two, they're like engaged and they realize like, oh, I'm actually chatting with a human here. It's not just, some nameless, faceless food site.
Isn't it funny how something that was like doom and gloom, it's the end of the world, we're all going to die, our blogs are going to explode, can turn out to be really not a huge deal? I feel like that so often happens in our industry.
Yeah.
Definitely the case for the third-party cookie situation. But thank you for all of that. And then last question for you. The AI sites that are stealing content. Is Raptive on the case about this?
Yeah. So I have to give our onboarding and policy and compliance people a ton of credit. So we started seeing, AI, kind of questionable sites. Well, and there's always been questionable sites, right? There's always been, sites where you're like, this is a site on gardening, but I don't know if you've ever picked up a spade, and so like our policy and compliance team, and then, plagiarism has always been an issue. We see that, gosh, I don't know, 3 times this past week where people, in fact, they would just copy the whole site. Some Raptive site all of a sudden gets copied and we're like, and we see like, because if somebody copies your entire Raptive site, including your Raptive ad script, the ads that will show on their site will earn for the Raptive creator, not for whoever,
right?
Whatever. And so we're seeing we're like, why is there money being made from, and page views? Why are there page views coming from, something else? And it's like, oh, they copied your site. So we see that more and more. But our policy compliance unit has always been very, very strict in like reviewing and even, some of the just like investigations that they'll do, and they're like, oh, we saw an application from this kind of blah, blah, blah. And like, here is the person, and like, they'll find the person behind it. And like, not like, like, okay, like, yep. Like, oh, and, they got a site in already and we re-reviewed that. And like, oh, that one was questionable too. Like we shouldn't have been working with them. So they're extremely strict, and that just continued into AI. And so we, now every now and then we've had a handful, I think 50 or so, sites that had been in. Sometimes they, somebody sells their site and then somebody buys it, and all of a sudden it was great content. And then now it's, they're just pumping out AI driven nonsense. And so we've unfortunately had to kick, 50 or so sites out, which is always disappointing. Because we're like, oh, like that was a real human once. That was, that was like somebody that, we really enjoyed working with, maybe before he or she sold the site, and whatnot. But so for us, that's the biggest thing. And we know this, that if those folks if you couldn't make money from like spamming just AI nonsense into a blog post and posting it on Pinterest, then people wouldn't do it, right? They're doing this because they want to make money. Just like all sorts of other, things that they could do. And so for us, that's our biggest burning conviction of like, no, like we're going to do our best to make sure that they don't make money from Raptive, um, and whatnot. At the same time, these folks are, doing quite well on Pinterest and whatnot. And so we're working a lot with Pinterest. We're working with the C-suite at Pinterest on down, to help them understand, like, and even there's things where like if you search for oftentimes a creator site, like it's not like, chicken breasts recipe. It's like search for your site. And it's like, you can't even find your own pins because it's like, there's a bunch of
Yeah.
AI, just glop and whatnot. And so we've spent a ton of time, just about every meeting that we're having with Pinterest right now gets to this because it impacts the readers, like, sure, it looks good. So readers are like, or users are like, like, oh, wow, that's an impossibly cheesy grilled cheese.
Yeah.
And it's like, it is like, you can't actually make a grilled cheese that's
Yeah.
this tall, and so, but like people click it because they're like, wow, that looks amazing. And so like we're really working because it's like, yeah, but then the reader's quite disappointed when, that recipe doesn't turn out to look anything like what they made, or doesn't work because it actually wasn't tested. So we're working, that's like the biggest thing that we're doing is we're working with Pinterest. We're working, just like say like, listen, this is, and how can they help them identify these sites? How can they understand like the impact that like, hey, the Pinterest is a symbiotic relationship, right? They benefit when real amazing creators post amazing content. If you're looking for a DIY bunk bed, and all of a sudden you can't find how to make a DIY bunk bed, you find like a bunch of impossible non-plans, but like really cool looking photos. Eventually you're going to go search somewhere else. And same with recipes, and same with, all of the different beauty tips, all of the things that people are going to Pinterest to search for, and whatnot. So we're very optimistic about like the medium to long future. But like right now it's kind of a bumpy road. And so, we're just really working to cut off the monetization. And we have hundreds of these sites apply. There's like floods of these sites. And like the disappointing thing is you see them and you're like, oh my goodness, that site has 400,000 page views a month, 500,000, has 2 million page views a month. You're like, oh, wow, we're good. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this site. I don't know like who they are, but wow, congratulations. And then you're like,
red flag.
It's AI, and you're like, so we're certainly leaving money on the table. But for us, like we don't want to just like try to make a quick dollar or quick $1,000,000, at the cost of the real humans that we're supporting.
I so appreciate that. There was one site, there's not many things that trigger me and get under my skin, but this is one of them because we put so much work into our sites. So there was one site in particular that had ads on it, not Raptive ads, but it literally made me want to cry every time I looked at it. I was like, how in the world it just drove me crazy. So I truly just so appreciate that you guys are doing this, and you have standards and values and you're holding to them. So thank you. This was all amazing. I know this is going to be absolutely devoured by so many food bloggers. To end, do you have words of inspiration for us? Just, I don't know, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a conversation I had just this week, this lady, her traffic was down. For her, it was, AI on Google was taking a bunch of her searches. And she said, she's like, this is just the industry that we're in. She said, and it feels like every few years, something like this happens, right? Now we have AI and Pinterest, we have, Google, there's recipe quick view. There's a lot of things out there that are, oh my goodness, how are we going to do that? At the same time, there's cool opportunities. I'm talking to people who are figuring out how to drive traffic to their sites from TikTok and Instagram and different places that maybe historically haven't ever been a traffic source for creators. And I just want to encourage you, just like keep on keeping on, keep trying, keep innovating. Try the things that people tell you are working for them. Try things that maybe nobody else is trying. And we just want to encourage you, like, the reason that your site has gotten to be a really good size, maybe historically, maybe still right now, is because like people actually want to find your content. They want to find your recipes and the unique kind of flavor that you're bringing to the world. And, we can't always control, what giant tech companies do in the moment, but we just want to encourage you to keep on keeping on. I was chatting with a lady, 50% of her search traffic had just gone away. She was just devastated. I know she was, there's health problems. Like there was a lot going on. And she just kept at it. She tried a bunch of new things. She tried some platforms she had never tried before. And it was so fun. I chatted with her just a couple months ago, and it had been about a year. And she said, like, James, like my traffic is back. She's like, my traffic is back to where I never believed it could do it. And it's like, and I just want to encourage folks. Like, she thought she was done. She thought it was over. And we hear about people getting discouraged and like, I just can't do it anymore. And I just want to encourage you to keep encouraged, because like you've built something amazing before. And if you just keep trying, keep doing, sometimes it's going back to the old things that maybe when you just thought, I'm just a blogger sitting here answering every comment, but like just keep trying to do those things. And we're seeing a lot of people eventually break out of the funk and kind of and reconnect with their audience in a deeper way. And so that's my big encouragement to you all.
Wow. Great encouragement to end on. Thank you so much for that. I know that will give a lot of people hope. We're going to put together a show notes page for you, James. If you want to go peek at those, you can head to eatblogtalk.com/Raptive. So if people want more information about Raptive, maybe they want to apply for the network, can you tell them where to go for that?
Yeah, sure thing. If you just want to apply and you're like, hey, this sounds amazing, I will say we have a 50,000 page view a month minimum. And I guess if you're at 48, don't tell anybody, but they might let you in. But, so that's 48, 50,000 page views a month minimum. So if you're at least above that, you can go to raptive.com/apply. It's very, very simple. At the same time, if you just want to get a hold of me or my team, I like always aspire to answer all these myself, but I realize that sometimes I'll get like 40 questions and I'm like, I'm not great at email. But if you just want to, you can just email me directly. It's james@raptive.com. I'm very happy to, answer questions, talk through things or whatnot, or potentially even just like get you to somebody who can. We have a lot of experts and amazing analysts that are spending all day. Maybe it's your site's with Raptive. They actually know your site and are on it, once a week. Or, if you're not with Raptive, but, have some questions, very happy to help.
Thank you, James. This was amazing. I so appreciate you. And thank you for listening, food bloggers. I will see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this topic, be sure to watch the video shown on the screen. See you next time.